Hello everyone, glad to be here. I'm Corentin, one of the publishing managers in the team, and I'm here today with Halil.
Hi guys, this is Halil from the Istanbul office.
Yeah, so both of us are in Istanbul right now. Oh, are in the Istanbul office, but right now we're in Paris for a few days, and yeah, we're doing the live stream here together. So yeah, before we get started, just wanted to send a little shout out to Misha and to Gabriel Topolov, and both of those guys worked on wood turning, which is killing it right now in the charts, and it's really awesome to see the product of that collaboration working well. There's a lot of work going on that game, big roadmap ahead on A/B tests. So yeah, shout out to them and congrats on the great job. So today, again, we have a normal sort of Q&A session. But before we go to the Q&A and we see the questions you guys have started to send us, there's a small case study that we prepared on Bikesil, and what we did on the game, how we improved it from iteration to iteration, and then how we actually launched it eventually. So let's start on the slides for Bikesil. So Bikesil, the reason the game was a success is because it combines two things that are really strong. The first thing is that it has a relaxing core gameplay loop. And the second thing is that the high score feature, the distance feature, also helps in a really strong way to retain players on the long term. So it's the balance of both things. One, on the short term, a really good rewarding gameplay loop. And on the long term, a sort of long-term objective to give the player the opportunity to beat himself and to improve himself over the long term. So let's go into a bit of details on the game. So at the very beginning, this was the first sort of core build that the Tarbush guys sent us. We didn't even test this. This was just a very rough toy that they did in Unity to see how the game could be and how it felt. So the inspiration was Dune, something a bit airy, floaty, and that looked quite nice visually, and to really emphasize the flight and the gliding features of the game. So this first toy mechanic that was built by the Tarbush team really was just to confirm that when we were playing with it, there was actually a really nice feeling, a nice flow in the game, and that was something nice to repeat. We then did a first iteration with the first build, where there was a target to aim. We had a race feature with other bots you can see there racing against us. And there was very basic environments. All of this is very basic stuff that was bought on the Unity asset store. There was no real work done on it. As you see, the retention metrics, the initial retention metrics weren't that strong. Day 1 was okay, but not amazing. Day 7 was actually good for a first build, and CPI was also interesting. So for us, that is positive and very encouraging to iterate and to continue working on the idea. So, the second big iteration that we did was to change two things. One was, instead of having a target, we created this sort of ruler, this distance ruler, at the end that you see after the hills, and that encouraged players to really improve themselves and to try and beat themselves in the next race. The second thing we added was the upgrade system, where you could upgrade the speed of your bike. So again, in the same idea, to beat yourself and to improve yourself. That really helped on day 1 and day 7. Day 1 bumped up to around 45%, and day 7 to 13%, from 9%. CPI was also very stable. It actually reduced a little bit, so that was again very encouraging for us. But we weren't quite satisfied with it. These are strong KPIs, but we thought, okay, there's a really good potential here. We want to do something actually big. Let's see if we can actually bring it further and go further with the game and make something really amazing. And the big change that we then added was, as you see here, there's a ring, a green ring at the end of the hills, and that's basically a booster to really emphasize that last jump that you do. And that really helps you go really far away in the game and further and further. What we also changed was the easier hills. So the way that the hills were done, they were smoother hills, more if you fucked up as a player and you could have a chance to recover. So the game was made a bit more forgiving in the design of the hills, so that you didn't have to die and you did have a chance to recover. What we also added was coins to guide the player and to help to act as an indicator as to where they should land on the hills. And this also again helped a little bit on day one. We went up to 46, and then on day 7 that also really boosted by quite a lot to really emphasize that final flight feeling with a booster at the end of the hills. And CPI continued reducing to 19 cents. So with those stats, we were like, okay, wow, we've got something really strong. Let's go ahead. Let's push full steam ahead. So obviously, like you guys know, we have a co-production team, and that team works on all of the games that we launch worldwide, and that's to ensure that there is a really high quality team that works with the studios that we launch games with, and to ensure that the process goes really fast and it's a really professional and efficient process. So the launch happened extremely quickly. The launch ops team is made of around 7 devs, 3 artists, and 1 manager, and the team is growing. They helped the Tarbush team with the SDK integration, the A/B tests to be ready at launch, so that we were ready to go straight away. I didn't mention it here, but they also helped with the Android version of the game to just go really, really fast. And the launch ops team really worked. They were integrated into the Slack channel and worked cohesively with the Tarbush team, so it was really fluid communication to go really, really fast. And to help, we need that in order to deal with unexpected issues. And so this launch ops team is really a huge added value that we've started doing now for the past around 6 months. And this team is really key for us to launch extremely quickly, to get to market really, really quickly, and to have a really strong A/B test. And these guys are piling up knowledge, piling up best practices to go really fast. So 6 months ago, 1 year ago, a launch would have taken maybe 10 days. Today, as you see, it's like under 5 days. And we're again always trying to reduce that time to come below 5 days, to take 1 or 2 or 3 days maximum at launch, so it goes really, really fast. Both on iOS and on Android. So that was the run through the presentation from Bikesil. And I think now we can turn to questions that you guys have sent us on the chat.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can start with a question from Starman. How soon is too soon to test the game for the first iteration? I think the sooner is better most of the time. But if you believe that the prototype that you have doesn't convey the message that you want to give to the players, the feeling, maybe it might be too soon. I think on average 7 days, 10 days is a good time for a prototype. If it takes you too much time, I think there's something wrong with the prototype or something else, but maybe 1 or 2 days might be too soon if you feel that it's not enough for the prototype phase. So around a week I think is a good time for the prototypes usually.
Yeah, I mean, around a week, I completely agree. That's a good timing for you to create a decent prototype with a good game feeling, well balanced. Longer than that, then that means there's maybe a problem, or either technical, or maybe you're trying to do something that's too greedy in terms of R&D, and you shouldn't do that. At the prototyping phase, you should really focus on creating a core gameplay feeling that's really strong and easy to do for you. So I agree, yeah, with that length of time. There was another question right now from Marat Gidyasov. The question is, I'm seeing shockingly bad CPI in the tests during this week, $3 to $5. Is everything okay with Facebook? And my prototype is, or is my prototype simply so bad? At the moment, I think we see extremely good CPI on other games and on stuff that we're launching in the next couple of days. Yeah, we are launching games in the next couple of days. So I think we're not seeing any technical problem on the platform at the moment. There was a Facebook issue that didn't affect CPI; it affected the testing itself. This is now resolved. So CPI, seeing really, really high CPI, I would not attribute that to Facebook not working or there being a technical problem with Facebook or the dashboard, because we see a lot of really good CPI at the moment. So probably linked. I think this is an individual situation. There's a link to your prototype.
So one question is from Barigan Dimasso, if I pronounce it right. Can you tell more about the studio behind Bikesil? Maybe Corentin, you want to mention because you are working with them.
Sure. So Yeah, absolutely. So Bikesil, so it's a team called Tarbush. Rani and Kotaiba are the main guys behind it. I don't know the name of the other developers. They're a team of 5-6 people. And what's really interesting with them is that they work completely remotely. They have team members in Turkey. A lot of the core developers are in Turkey. Rani, the leader, is in the UAE. They have artists and devs also in Algeria and in Jordan. So the team is sort of spread out geographically, and they all work remotely, and they use the usual tools for remote work. And it hasn't been easy at times, especially at the beginning for them, when they had to sort of ramp up the skills, and especially on the hiring side, it's difficult to hire remotely. But it works extremely well. You cut down on all the commuting time. People just stay really focused. I think it requires a lot of organization, but for them it works. And we have actually a few other teams that work in a remote way, and it works really well. So that's the main thing that I think is quite interesting with them. We're prototyping, again, lots of games. We're continuing working on Bikesil. And yeah, it's just an absolute pleasure to work with people that are passionate, that are smart, that are fast. So yeah, I think it's great to work with them.
So another question, one question from Netesh. Since we are talking on Bikesil, what would be the depth in the gameplay of this game? So for me, I think feeling that you are improving yourself in the game, being more skillful and improving the combos that you have in the game, I think it's the main depth part, because it takes a bit time to understand the mechanics and you need to play it a little bit more. But after you reach that level, I think the game becomes more and more fun. And I think at the end of the level, going through the other islands you need to be super skillful to do that. So I think that improvement in your skills is the real depth in the game. Otherwise, the feeling of flying and the other things are really cool, but I think that skill part is the most important thing in the Bikesil in terms of depth.
I completely agree. Yeah, I have nothing to add. No, that's really it. Like, it's the upskilling part and becoming better and better at it, and seeing that you can go farther and farther is validation for that upskilling for the player, and that's the long-term depth. There was a question from Starman. The question is on launch shops and co-production. Does this affect the payout later on? No, it doesn't. If the co-production team, the launch shops team works directly with all the studios, and this is just a service that Voodoo does, just like any other team or any other parts of Voodoo work to support studios, to support you guys, to make amazing games. Does not affect the payout. The idea is to make an even bigger payout, to launch games quickly, be on the market. So no change on that.
Okay, and one question from Noah. With the sport team, are you seeing a higher male audience in the Bikesil? Did the team do anything to make it more accessible to the white audience? I think the bike team is generally very mass market, so we don't see a higher male audience. I think it's very balanced for the bikes game.
Absolutely.
But maybe other teams, if it's too masculine, I think it's always good to make it more mass market. You can change, you can play with the team, or you can change the whole game with keeping the feeling. But on the bikes, I think it's very mass market.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's a little bit more masculine than it is feminine, but that's fine. But yeah, the bikes aspect and the gliding, flying, core gameplay feeling that you get is something everyone can relate to. It's kind of genderless, and that's why it works well. There's an interesting question. Let me look for it. Yeah, from Homemade Games. Bikesil is a 3D version of Dune. Yes. I tried 3D version of Snake vs. Block and it didn't really work. Okay, interesting question, because yes, Bikesil is a 3D version of Dune, but it added more things to it. So one innovation was the 3D. Another innovation compared to Dune is the bots aspect. And another innovation compared to Dune is the long jump at the end, which you don't have in Dune. So it's a visual upgrade, and it's also a core gameplay upgrade. The feeling of depth, in Bikesil versus Dune is quite different. You achieve something different in both games, so that's why it is a good upgrade. It is a good twist on Dune. Simply going 3D on a game that is 2D often does not cut it. It's simply not enough. The usual innovations or twists that we recommend is obviously, like, it can be visual, but it should also be core gameplay, adding something new, another layer of mechanic, something new to it. Another example can be
Twisted Road and Aquapark.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Like, I think on the Twisted Road we have the 3D version, so in that sense Aquapark is not the 3D version of Twisted Road, but there are, I think, three main different things between Twisted Road and Aquapark. First is the going from portrait to landscape, so it helps a lot. The second thing is the bots, and you can play with the other people. Of course, there's a different team, but I think in the Aquapark the jumps are way easier than the Twisted Road, so the balancing is way more good, way better, and you also can kill the other bots. So there's also another level of depth. So not making a 3D of an old successful game is always bring you a hit game, but adding something new and making some twists, it usually helps.
Definitely. A question from Quentin Julien. Do you think hyper-casual is going to evolve this year? Yes, hyper-casual evolves every month, every quarter. So it's hard to look into a crystal ball and say, okay, this is how it's going to look like. But we can take certain safe bets in saying what kind of direction hyper-casual is going to take. Hyper-casual is what is not going to change, I think is an easier start for me, would be to say the core gameplays in hyper-casual are going to remain very simple, very accessible. That's a core definition of hyper-casual. That's not going to change. What's also not going to change is how people play them. And what I mean by that is people are still going to play hyper-casual in very short periods of time, little pockets of time in their day-to-day lives, and hyper-casual is still going to fit into that. What is going to change, I think we've seen already change a lot, is more and more monetization meta. And we've seen a lot of games now on the market that are in the last 3 months that are adding more and more casual type of meta. So I think we're going to continue seeing progress on that side. So, for example, we've seen the chests, we've seen more and more missions or smart ways to include missions and smart ways to include shops, more upgradable systems in Draw Car or in Fire Clash, for example. The upgrade system is very different, very unique, and it's more casual-like than hyper-casual. So I think we're going to continue to see innovation in that direction on the meta aspect. Another thing we're probably going to see is so there was also a question here about Arch Hero, and I think it's a good way to tie these two topics now. So Arch Hero is what we call super casual internally. People call it hybrid casual also on the market. What we see happening in the future is that a lot of games are going to start off as hyper casual. The process of creating hyper casual games is really fast, so that's great. So they'll start off as hyper casual, and then based on the playtime of these hyper casual games, for example, if we have a huge playtime of like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, we'll start thinking or telling ourselves, well, there's actually potential to transform this hyper casual game into a super casual product. And we're going to see more and more of that, I think, where hyper casual teams are continuing to create hyper casual games, and when one of those hyper casual games pops up and looks like it has the potential to be super casual, then obviously we'll work on it to bring it to the super casual status. So that's the kind of prediction I can make for hyper casual for this year.
And another question from Nitesh: Push 'em all is a hyper casual version of zombie survival sort of genre. Would you say breaking down AAA game genres into hyper casual game would work really well? I think it's one of the options that you have. Like you can check the AAA games, you can check the old Flash games, and you can deconstruct them. Also, you can look at the casual games and find small gameplays in that sense. And I think one good example is Pokeball. Like Pokeball is deconstructed from one of the Mario games, so it's one of the Mario games have the same basic mechanic, and the developer just took it and made a complete new game out of it. So I think it's a good exercise. And also there's another question from Homemade Games, and it's tough to get new ideas after failing so much. So what do you suggest to find us good ideas? I think this is one way, like looking at the bigger games and deconstruct them and find the real fun parts and make them more hyper casual. Or of course you can always be innovative and find new ideas, but definitely this is one of the best ways that you can come up with ideas.
Yeah. I mean, we've done a lot of live streams where we show case studies of games and deconstructing like iteration from iteration and KPIs from KPIs, how they evolved. And we also spoke about the sources of inspiration. Like Bike Seal, the inspiration is Dune, right? Like that was the starting point, and how can we improve Dune? For other games like Flip Dunk, the source of inspiration was not a game. It was actually a video from YouTube of seeing someone launching a basketball and dunking from afar. So there are different types of techniques, different types of sources of inspiration. One is not better than the other. It really depends on what helps you guys generate lots of ideas. And if you find a technique that excites you, keeps you motivated and helps you generate lots of ideas, not lots on a big volume, but on a more recurrent process, even if you just have like 3 ideas a week, that's already huge. But if you can do that for a long period of time, that's what's really good, really valuable. That's how we see the good teams differentiate themselves from the less good teams. So find the technique that helps you on the long term generate lots of ideas. There was a question from Alexandru Z. Is it important to implement daily achievements to increase retention from the beginning? No, guys, again, we've said this a lot for the past years. Don't do meta gameplay when you do prototypes. Don't think about that now. Just focus on creating a core gameplay that's really satisfying and rewarding to do. Meta gameplay is an extra layer that comes later on. People are attracted to your game not for the meta, they're attracted for the core gameplay mechanic. The core gameplay is 90% of the value of your game. Like it makes all of it. We've never been able to launch a game just because of the meta or daily missions or rewards. That's not it.
And there's a question from K4 Chance. How many levels need to be done for the first prototype? I think there is no magic answer, or there is no one right answer, but I think the main thing is just to create 10 minutes of unique playtime, which is usually 20 to 25 levels, depending on the game. It might be a bit less, a bit more, but I think that is one of the sweet spots that we experience. So don't push yourself to make like hundreds of levels, because you don't know before the testing if it works or not. So be efficient and make as less levels as possible. I think 20 or 25 is enough for the first prototype.
Yeah, and if you're doing it depends also what kind of game you're doing. If you're doing a runner and you can procedurally generate lots of levels, then that's great. So you should be able to think of ways, depending on the type of game you're doing, to quickly scale the number of levels you have. If on the other hand you're doing more of a puzzle game, where you need to handcraft each level hand by hand, in that case, limit yourself to 15, 20, 25 levels, whatever number of levels you need to have around 10 minutes of unique gameplay. Because you don't waste your time on doing lots of level design, level building, when you actually don't know if the core mechanic is validated or not. Okay, I saw another question here that was interesting. A question from, okay, it's just letters. Okay, I'm just going to read the question. What are the recurring issues failed prototypes have in common? I guess, so there are a number of recurring issues. One of them that I see, the one that pops into mind when I think about this is lack of clarity, meaning that visually you just do not understand what you're doing, what your objective is, how you do this, what you're supposed to do. Your video, your gameplay, and a video of your gameplay should be very logical, very natural. So if you have things that are floating in the air just because you made them float in the air, and then you have something else happen to them, or it moves suddenly out of screen, something illogical, something that's not natural or governed by the natural laws of physics, is going to be surprising for people, or is going to be confusing for people. So that won't help. And that brings me to a point on physics. If you can have physics in your game, that's generally really good, because physics is something very natural that people understand. People understand gravity. They understand that I push something out of the way. They understand that sort of stuff, right? It's logical. So physics can be used for that. Color bump, to give you an example, is just very logical. It's one ball pushing objects out of the way. Like, you just understand what's going on, right? So one of the recurring issues is lack of difficulty of understanding visually of your gameplay, because you've created things that are just, maybe for you it's logical, but if you show it to people in the street, they just won't understand what's happening. Do you have any other examples of recurring issues?
Maybe most of the people watch the videos like 3 to 5 seconds. So if it takes too long to explain one idea, I think first it might not be a hyper casual idea, or maybe you need to find a faster way to explain what is going on in the game. So let's always think that people are just watching for 3 to 4 seconds on their smartphone. So it needs to be super clear and super intuitive.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will just skip the video and look for something else, I think.
Okay. So another question from there have been a lot of questions from Homemade Games. Thanks a lot, man. The question is: should we iterate some interesting prototype from a while back, more than 1 year? It depends. Obviously, you can do it. We're always happy to test stuff. However, you have to look at the market today and think, okay, does this have a chance to work today? If someone built a prototype from 2016 or 2017 or something that looks like a 2D runner, kind of like a snake or a rider from Ketchup, if we test that again today, there's very little chances that it will fly in today's market, simply because the market has changed so much. Again, compare the top 100 today to the top 100 like in 2017. There's a huge difference. So, however, what you can do is, if you have a cool mechanic from 2017 that didn't work out on CPI but had good retention, for example, you can always rework that idea, give it a theme, maybe add ragdolls, because ragdolls today helps a lot on CPI. Having a grounded background, so something with water in the background, can help on CPI. And that, sure, you can redo that, but simply retesting and not doing any change, that won't yield any results. If you retest something, you should be bringing something new to the table, simply because the market has changed and you need market fit for your game.
There's one question from Richard Brunson. Hi guys, if my game has 30% day one, is it possible to significantly improve it to 40-45, or should we just try again with another game? I think just looking to day one might not be enough. We also need to consider CPI and the playtime. And also, I think one important thing, if you believe that your prototype is more or less finished, and if you polished it and you added all of the things that you need, maybe it is very difficult for you to improve it to 40-45. But if it's very rough, if the playtime is good, and if you have a considerable CPI, I think there's always a way to improve it. For example, in the bike seal, I think the starting day one was 30-35.
Around that,
somewhere around that, but it was quite rough, but CPI was very promising. So it's always good to iterate those kind of ideas, but you need to consider all of the KPIs that we have in one basket.
Yeah, exactly. You can't take them in isolation. You have to consider everything as a whole. You have to have a holistic appreciation of your KPIs. On bike seal, CPI was promising. Day 7 was actually not too bad either. So we're like, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's think more about the game. I think we have maybe time for one last question.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, a question from Johan Ulrich. Ulbrich, sorry man. What are good KPIs for a first prototype? Again, it depends on what you have, on playtime, retention, CPI. It's a mix of things. I think that's it. Do we...
if you want to give some numbers, maybe I think if the CPI is lower than 40-45 cents, you can try to iterate. If you have a playtime which is around 15 minutes, I think it's definitely have something strong or very strong day 7 or day 1. These are also good indications, but as we said before, it's the mix of all of these things, so you need to check all of the KPIs at once.
Absolutely, yeah. Cool, that's it for us, guys. Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll be back very soon with more stuff. Thanks.
Take
care, guys.
Bye.